Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I think that I'm having an allergic situation happening. We're recording this, it's still the middle of the winter. By the time you hear this, it's the spring, which is more appropriate, but like my eyes are all red. Can you hear my eye? Can you hear my red eyes on the podcast? Can you hear how red my eyes are? You can hear it in my throat. I apologize if I don't sound right, and I'm sorry to have already taken up this much of your day with nonsense. Sitting across the table from a former student of mine who it's just great to see again after the years. And I've been watching from afar the trajectory of the career. It's always fun for me to watch success of the kids leaving the creative circus. Neisha graduated from the circus, 2006? Mm-hmm. Had an internship at BBDO Atlanta. She was FCB Chicago. She was at Ogilvy Action. Mm-hmm. What is Ogilvy Action?
So now it's all part of Ogilvy, but at the time it was their experiential wing.
They used to have little sub-names for stuff, like
for
Ogilvy
everything.
One, Ogilvy
Yes.
Interactive. Then she was at Toy before going to Ogilvy and Mather in New York as a copywriter for 2 years. Then she moved to Global Hue. She's been on and off, I'm going to say, a teacher at Miami Ad School. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were at Publicist Kaplan Thaler.
Yeah, well, so I was at Publicist, then they merged with Kaplan Thaler,
Publicist.
became Public, and then they were PKT, and now they're Publicists. So some identity issues.
All agencies have identity issues. I don't know why they feel like they have to change. And then it was almost a year at McGarry Bowen before going freelance, and then landing at Career. You know what? I'm not going to say it's Career 2.0. I think it's Career 1.5. Because I don't think this was a career shift to end up at Facebook. Doing what you're doing. I think that you were prepared for this job from the rest of your... I agree.
I didn't know that at the time. I think when I took the job offer, I was like, oh shit, I don't know what's happening.
Right.
But now I'm like, oh yeah, no, I have a lot of sense. I have a lot of experience, and this makes, this works.
Yeah, you're bringing something very special. So welcome back to the circus.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Weird to be back at all?
A little bit. I feel like I've gotten taller.
Who's gotten taller?
I have. And the kids maybe have gotten smaller. I'm not sure.
I'm looking at your shoes to see if you got some... They've definitely gotten younger, that's for sure. The students have gotten... So let's just jump right to that, because it was the last thing I think someone asked you in forum was about how you got this job. And I thought it was very interesting the way you put it. But if you don't mind telling the listeners again, it's kind of like... Because it's a pretty traditional advertising trajectory from intern to copywriter to you went to then ACD to creative director. So talk a little bit about sort of how you end up jumping out of the agency business into really media or something bigger.
Yeah. Well, so I'll just actually talk from that part as to kind of where I was in 2015, I think it was, when everything kind of changed. So I quit my job, not having another job, not really having a plan except for the fact that I was going to quit my job and freelance. And so This was a really big move, and I realized that I couldn't look for a new job because I didn't know what it was I really wanted to do and if I was happy with what I was doing in the first place. And then I think...
Did you know that you weren't happy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew I was not, no one was happy. And I knew that I couldn't survive in an environment where everybody was unhappy.
Interesting. Do you know why? Do you have any insight now as to why you think people weren't happy?
The clients were very difficult to deal with. In particular, the ones that we had were when you deal with clients that work in fear-based organizations, they transfer that fear to you. And so there was always, I think, a fear of losing the client or losing the business or, something like that. And then...
it's interesting, though. Yesterday here at school, they had an American Marketing Association. They had a education thing for students trying to get into marketing jobs. Most of the people in the room, I think, were looking for client side or account management jobs. And one of the questions that the moderator asked, I was on this panel, they said, what was the biggest obstacle or challenge you've had in your career as a creative or as a professional advertising person? My answer was the fear of the client who runs that piece of business for that company, who's unwilling to take a risk for fear of losing their job.
Yep. Yeah. It's so real. It's like that. and seeing it and understanding, like, there's the fear of losing your job. There's some people that are just like afraid of losing their bonus. So, so they're less even likely to want to, they're in different places. But so when you're dealing with those types of things, especially as a creative person that you want to push things, you want to do things differently, you really can't. And then the account people, I think, it was very much a dog eat dog kind of rough environment that I'm not built for. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like a Wall Street kind of environment that as a creative person, I don't think most creative people are built for that, but I personally am not. So having to constantly fight with people or have to defend myself and all that type of stuff.
I don't think you ever want to work as a creative person at an agency where you're questioning what is the name on the top left corner of the account person's paycheck. Is account person's paycheck paid for the same company that, are we working for the same company?
Exactly.
Or are you working for another company?
Yeah.
Are you working for the client, or are you working with us to try to work together? It's poisonous.
That's exactly what it was. It was very toxic. And I felt that there was, within the creative team, there's a lot of respect for me and what I did, but from the account side, that did not exist. And that wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my team. And I was constantly trying to protect them and fight for them. So it was just every day I was just leaving, just feeling so drained and tired. Yeah. So I quit and said, I'll take some time off and figure out what I really want to do. Maybe I don't want to be in advertising anymore. I'd been working since I was 15 years old. So this was like legitimately the first time that I just didn't have a job. And I realized that I couldn't deal with that. I can't be a housewife. It was the worst. God, no. My first 2 weeks at home, I legitimately felt horrible because I didn't want to cook. I didn't want to clean. I didn't want to go get groceries. And my husband would come home and I'd be like, I don't know what to tell you.
How are you on vacations? Can you chill on a vacation?
For a designated period of time. I'll schedule that in.
Doesn't it take you, like, let's just say you guys are going to go, I don't know, let's say you're going to go to Paris. Like when you land, don't you have a day when you're still kind of feel like you're tethered, and then it breaks, and then you have like 2 days until you're kind of like, I got to get back?
Yeah. Okay. We went to Portugal for our honeymoon last year, and it was the first time that I disconnected from work email.
That's great.
And altogether, like Facebook, I wasn't on Facebook, which was the most, I think, weirdest feeling in my body to deal with. But then I actually started not even taking my phone when I went out of the hotel room, and it was the best. Right. The best.
Okay, so let's get back to it. So you were at the point where you didn't even know if you want to stay in advertising.
Yeah, and but then I started working on freelance projects, doing projects I cared about. So like I helped launch a beauty brand in South Korea that was really focused on female empowerment. Great. And I worked on non-for-profits like websites, stuff like that. So as I was looking at that, I was like, okay, well, I do love working, and I love working on things that matter. I had a great conversation with a career coach that she had me do this writing exercise where I had to write down, what are the things I love doing? What are the things I'm good at? And what are the things I value? And where do those things overlap? And based on that exercise, the main thing she said, when you look at jobs, look at job descriptions, don't look at titles. Since I couldn't figure out, of course, where I wanted to go. Really so I would just look at companies that I was interested in and look at the job descriptions for everything.
What were those questions? Things that you love doing, things that you're...
What I love doing, what I'm good at, and what I value.
Very cool.
And I think it's really interesting to note what I love doing and what I'm good at, because those aren't always the same thing.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Like you could, like, I love singing. I'm not good at it for shit,
wow.
But I love singing. So I think it's important to think about where those things overlap.
That's
and
really interesting.
How they work together. So that was really helpful, because then when Facebook called and I started looking at the job description and having conversations with them about the role and what was happening, I was so interested in it, and I was so interested in the way that they approached teamwork and just collaboration, and which is the same thing, but concepting and moving the industry and that type of stuff.
Teamwork and collaboration are cousins. I mean, teamwork is the team you're with. Collaboration is oftentimes someone you've met today, though, right?
Well, fair enough. I hadn't thought about it like that. I hadn't thought about that.
In other words, what I mean, like, isn't collaboration when an agency comes to you with an idea? To be a good collaborator, you've got, I think, and maybe this is just me mentally riffing, they're bringing you something that wasn't your idea, that you might not even necessarily like, and figuring out a way to move that along. That's a collaborative sort of relationship.
There is, I think, maybe a different set of goals and weight of interest in it. That's a fair point, because like as a team, you are working towards the exact same thing, and as collaboration is a little bit different.
Right.
That's fair. So as I looked at that stuff, it was kind of like, wow, okay, this is really interesting. And at the same time, I had a creative director offer at another agency working with somebody that I really admired, that I really wanted
Can you say who that is?
to work
We
with.
don't want to.
Her name's Lisa Bright.
Okay.
And
because I drop names on here only if it's positive. Like I'll never say something
I
negative.
absolutely love her. Yeah, no, okay, no, I absolutely love her. And I really wanted to work with her, and it was like, it felt like this is what I've been waiting for my entire career, the opportunity like this. And it was the right opportunity. And then what happened, though, it was just like, well, it's Facebook or it's this, and it's doing this thing that I have never done before that sounds so weird and crazy, and I'm so scared about it, or doing this thing that I absolutely know I could do and kill it at. And I kind of just like ran towards the thing that scared me the most and said yes to Facebook.
I think that's amazing. I think it's a great that you found that young, because I think that sometimes we have to be honest and say, okay, this is sort of the prescribed path. I mean, this is already paved, and there's already like a really pretty nice house down there for me with a car. Or I can go this way where like there's some plants I'd like to taste. I've never eaten these trees.
Could kill
these
me.
Fruits.
Yeah,
could
be
die.
awesome, but we'll see.
And you know what? Honestly, I think that the fallback's always going to be there for you. There's nothing that's going to, you know what I mean? Like it's you're taking a leap, but it's really the leap with the net in a lot of ways. I think there's this myth. I think we feel that like we burned a bridge by turning her down. And I don't think that's really necessarily true. And you find yourself, she's going to be happier anyway. So
yeah, she was salty with me for a little bit, but
really?
now we're friends again.
Okay, that's funny. That's why you're just like this person I wanted to work with. But so does it feel? Does the besides being happier, does the job feel like an evolution? Does it feel radically different to you? And just for the sake of the listeners, let's talk a little bit about what your job is.
Okay. Yeah. So just about what my job is, I work with brands directly and agencies a lot of times to help them create content for Facebook, Instagram, and all of that. So part of that is just consulting with some of the work that agencies have already done.
Right. So we have the agency that shot a TV commercial. We have this campaign. We want to figure out a way to use Facebook because we think that's where our target audience is living.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Exactly. And I'll work with you to try to figure that out. There's times then where I co-create, where I actually get together with the agency and we concept together and we try
How
to
does that go? Does that work?
When it does work, not always, because agencies I realize are very protective and and possessive and those words you're using. So when they feel like we're trying to step on their toes, we're trying to steal their business and that type of stuff, they're less likely to kind of go all in.
That's interesting. They're scared that you're going to go straight to the client.
Yeah.
Ooh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Or that the client would like us better and then just want to work with us. And like, we don't want to be an agency.
Right.
Like, we don't want to do that. We want to empower agencies to be able to do great work. So, so that's sometimes what's challenging. When it works well, it's amazing because they know the brand and like they're like we always kind of talk about, they're the creative experts and we're the platform experts. So like with our powers combined, we can do amazing things. But of course, they need to come to the table with that in mind.
As a 10-year ad veteran, I'm curious. Do you ever see a campaign that you're looking at and you're like, oh, I don't know, that's really working. Like, I'm not sure that idea is like,
Yes.
Can you not be a creative director or like, it's just part of I know you, it's baked into you. You're going to be like, okay.
Yeah. It was very hard for me when I first started to constantly tell myself, you are not a creative director. You're not a creative director. Right. You cannot fix their work.
But can you, all right, this is just me wondering, can you steer at 5 degrees in the Facebook platform to leverage what you know to make what they have even better?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is what I do. But the thing is, I can't say this idea is flawed.
Right.
Or, like this execution doesn't make sense. But what I can say is, here's what's really awesome here that will translate great over here. Like, you know what I mean? So it's going to sound horrible, but it's kind of like how you do it with kids where, you kind of have to say, like, refocus their energy on things. Because there's always a nugget of a good idea in there. Like, I don't think that there's any like super bad creative people.
Right.
It's just we have to work it out together. And when people are open, like there's times now I have relationships with folks where they'll be in the concepting stage and like send me a note and be like, I'm thinking about this. Like, do you have any inspiration that you can share? Like, what do you think of that? And like, I love that because I want you to be great.
That's really cool.
So like when people create great content on Facebook and Instagram, that's great for everybody. It's great for me as a person that loves being on those platforms, and it's great for me as a person that works there.
Do you find that the agency creatives understand these platforms better than they used to, or don't understand it? Or where do you find they're sort of savvy?
I don't think that they understand it, and a large part of that is our fault that we don't educate people well enough. So a large part of what we're doing now is trying to make sure that we're getting out and talking to more agencies and making sure that they know that things have evolved, and here's how they've evolved, and here's how you use them, and here's the spaces you can play. Another part of it is, to be honest, that things move so quickly in Facebook that there's stuff that's like happening that I don't even know about.
Yeah, of course.
Or
today,
that I can't keep up with. You know what I mean? Like, so, there's people who now, like, their job is just focused on Facebook Live. And so if I have a question about it, I just go to them. Like, I'm not an expert on that, and there's people who just do Messenger. So we can't expect agencies to know everything,
Right.
So I think as long as they think about us more as partners than as competitors, which we're not at all, or B, as just kind of like a faraway resource, then we could do a lot more making
really
things together.
It's interesting that earlier you had kind of referred to Facebook as a media more than you're not going in-house, you've gone to work for a media company. I think that's an important distinction, that you're not an agency, you're not client side, you're an enabler. What's sort of the...
Great way of putting it.
What's the ideal sort of makeup of a person coming to work in your group or at Facebook? Like what kind of set of traits are you looking for those kind of folks?
That's such a good question, because we're doing some recruiting right now, and we had a whole conversation about this yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about like what are the things.
Yeah, I actually saw that on my feed. The notes from your meeting were in my Trends app or whatever. Because we're listening to you too. All right, whatever.
Curiosity is a big thing. Just being curious about the world, people, anything in particular. Like there's folks on my team who are, there's this one guy that was a photographer in like Iraq, and there's a lady that was an app designer. There's this lady I met, oh my gosh, I met her like 2 weeks ago, that worked for this company that explored outer space for other life. Like
she worked for SETI or something?
Yes, it was SETI. Yes. And I'm like, oh my God, like just amazing different backgrounds, but like that level of curiosity into anything is something that's really exciting.
You can train yourself to be curious. You can say that you're not going to accept things at face value. So when you're scrolling or when you're walking or when you see something and you're like, I don't know what that is, don't keep walking and scrolling. Stop and stare and ask and study it and figure out what the heck. Because I was telling my son about this when I went to summer camp when I was a kid. There was these mountains way off on the horizon, and where the two mountains met, there was this weird space that kind of looked like a waterfall. And every day I'm not saying I'm the most curious or brilliant person, I'm not fucking patting myself in the back, but I would stare at it and say, is that a waterfall? Is that a gap? Is that thinned trees? What is that? Sometimes I would stay up at night wondering what the heck that gap was. But I think you have to be that way. I think you have to be, in your world and of your world and staring at your world. I think that's probably the most important trait for a creative person.
For any creative person, exactly. I actually have an issue with, I thought it was just my husband had a problem with it, but I found out other people have a problem with it. That when if I encounter something I don't know, I immediately go look it up and do research. But sometimes in the middle of conversation. So
okay, you can work on that.
Yeah. That's the challenge. But the minute I'm just like, oh, I've never heard of that, or I'm not sure what that is, and I want to find out more.
So my daughter and I were in Chicago last week looking at colleges, and we just smelled weed everywhere. We just smelled it all over the street. So these two cops are hanging out in the corner. I'm like, should I go ask them? Like, what's the rule of this? Like, what's the law? And she's like, yeah, let's go talk to the cops. So we walked over to the cops. And I said to the guys, so what's the deal with this? And they were so funny and they were so nice. And they were saying, we're supposed to do something. We're supposed to have some number of pennies in my hand and weigh it. He said, and then he looks at my daughter and goes, I'm not a fucking scale. He's like, I'm not going to do that. And it was just so fun because evidently, I guess in Chicago, you can pretty much walk around smoking now.
Oh, okay.
But he said that's as of January 1st. So I don't know that there's any, I don't know why that matters.
Yeah.
But I don't need to know why it matters. At some point, these things will come back into your ideas and your way of seeing things. So Oh, by the way, listeners, I haven't even looked at my notes yet. This conversation has been completely free form. I do want to talk about sort of a seminal moment in your career that you mentioned. I think it was first in your presentation where you said I think it was a freelance project, or maybe it was an agency where you're working on the Citibank bicycle project.
Yeah, that was
and talk about what that meant to you as far as like your decisions for the rest of your career.
Yeah. So that was one of the first campaigns that I worked on. That it wasn't about selling something, and it wasn't about a big business result. It was about helping New York, and it was about creating something like people need a way to get around that's not the subway, that's not the train, that would be more efficient. And so, bringing this bike share thing to New York was great. And I loved the clients that we worked with because they were never just like, how do we make this more blue and more branded and more city? It was, how do we make this better for people? And just that type of thinking is, that made me realize that's the kind of work I want to do. I want to do things that are helping people and that mean more than just selling more things or helping a CEO get a second summer home. And even coming from that exercise I talked about doing when I looked at my values, that was something that really came out of that as well, that I need to feel like the work that I do is valued and is valuable.
I think that's huge. I think that's also a hallmark of people slightly younger than you, in their early 20s. Do you find that brands are caring more about the world than they did?
Oh, right now especially. But yeah, I think that we've actually seen studies, and we've talked a lot about this, is that because consumers are more socially conscious, brands are becoming more socially conscious and really focusing on social good. People are very curious.
That's the little wrinkle where capitalism is awesome, because they leverage if our population is caring about good things, then they realize there's a value in it, then they're going to do the right thing, even if it's about their bottom line. Good, fine, okay, whatever it takes.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, I don't care as long as like we're talking about these issues or we're doing something about these issues. And even when you look at in the past couple of years, there's been a trend looking at like where things are made and ingredients and that type of thing. That actually came from the fact that people were more focused on that personally and thinking about wanting things to be organic or wanting things to be, farmed a certain way or produced a certain way. And, so that's why there's been like a lot of campaigns that have talked about here's the farm to table stuff. You know what I mean? Right. Here's the background of how this was made. Here's who made it. Here's the story behind why we make things this way. So I think that is a really valuable way that people have changed the way that advertisers do their work. And not to plug where I work and what I do, but I actually think social media has a large part to do with that, because there's an opportunity to communicate with brands in a way that you couldn't before.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. So I just heard a couple of St. Kitts in your voice. So the listeners are like, what is that? Is that an affectation? No, she's from St. Kitts. Yeah. That's where she's from. It's in the Caribbean.
Don't get me upset, and then you'll hear a lot of it.
Let's get
don't. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have said that. You got tempted.
let's do it. So here's a question about portfolios. This is totally changing gears to like sort of school and students. So you looked at books this morning, and I know that the Citibank bike project is a good example of something that's great in the real world. Is that a book piece? And when you look at portfolios, is an event or a sort of a do-good thing enough, or do you still have to see? You're not looking at portfolios now, but I'm kind of thinking of your whole career when you're looking at books. Are you still looking at writer craft, art direction craft, or is it about a big idea? And can someone get away with saying, this is an idea that we haven't done, but maybe this is something we could do? I mean, talk a little bit about how a book should look in 2017, 2018.
That's a really great question, because I actually have been looking at books because I'm looking for interns.
Okay.
There needs to be an idea, like regardless, no matter what it is, there needs to be an idea, and there needs to be a reason for doing what you're doing. What I see in a lot of books is people who just do things that because it's fun or because it seems cool, versus is there a problem that you're trying to solve, and is there a reason why this brand in particular is the only one that can best do this thing in this way, versus just, you know what I mean? And I can't think of an example right now because I don't want to call out any of your students, but there were some scenarios where, you know what I mean? It just felt like, okay, well, that's an interesting idea, but what does that really mean and why? So I think having some sort of reason to be, some sort of problem that you're solving is really important. And then secondly, having craft. And that is what's missing, I think, a lot, unfortunately, especially when it comes to writing, that people just like don't write well or are lazy about it. Mm-hmm. And
they think that when they have their thought on paper, then they're done writing.
Yeah. and there's no like time spent like really crafting like what is that line, like what is the wit in it, and how does that work? How are people going to be moved by what you're saying?
I think we came up with 5 different words for territorial protection, and I mean those are the kind of things a writer has to do.
Yeah,
a writer can't just express the idea. Yeah, I think that like I was imagining that your portfolio is like a hand in a game. So you're dealt 6 cards and a bomb card. So this is the game. Okay, so your 6 cards have to all solve a problem. You're allowed 1 bomb card that's like yellow. That's like you're allowed to do because it's hilarious or awesome and doesn't solve a problem just because it's. But that's the one you get 1.
Yeah, and all of your stuff can't be fart jokes.
Yeah, go for the fart jokes. Make it hilarious. Even if it's off strategy and it's memorable, that's fine. But I think you said it really well in forum. You said, or maybe it was at lunch. You said that you have to solve a problem. Like, what problem is this solving?
Yeah.
And I say that to students, and like, but it's good. It's like, yeah, someone's going to like it. Got to think about this. Just because they're laughing doesn't mean it's a good book piece.
Right. And I mean, at the end of the day, you have to think about the fact that like you're going to be working for clients that are worried about their jobs and their bonuses, and so they need to have results against it. They need to have business results. They need to have sales awareness.
More than that, you've got to be able to tell. More than that, you've got to be able to articulate their problem and say, "Here's the solution."
Exactly.
To it.
Right. So you can't just live in this vacuum where it's just like, "Here's a fun thing that I thought I would do."
Right.
I think it just needs to go a little bit deeper than that. So I like to see books that have smart work, that have like thoughtful, strategic thinking. Like that is the first thing that I really try to look for. And then I dig a little bit deeper into craft and looking, because there's some things too where realistically you can be taught, right? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the way that agencies are often set up, there's no time to teach you, but there's stuff that you can be taught and you will learn once you hit the ground. But you can't really teach somebody how to be like smart and creative at one time. You know,
I think the only thing left to learn is like, so many things to learn. What's the creative director going to like? What's the client really? What's this particular client sensibilities? And then what are the media opportunities and all the technology and all that? Learning how to do a photo shoot and all those things. Those are things that you're not expected to know, but you better be able to design and kern and do a layout and write a good headline.
Yeah.
Can I talk a couple things about these posters you mentioned at Facebook? I love what you said. Nothing at Facebook is someone else's problem. What a great motto or mantra, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean for the listeners?
The example that I gave, essentially, if you see something wrong, fix it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, don't wait for someone else to do it. Take the initiative to do it. And the example I gave was earlier this week, we were in a meeting, and I said that our team needs some outward-facing material so that the industry knows who we are and what we do as we're looking for interns and new hires. Like, something very simple versus me trying to be like, here's one sentence, but sometimes it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. Something that we could just give to people and be like, here you go. And my boss said, that's such a great idea, Neisha. What's your timeline on finishing that?
Perfect.
I was like, oh, shit. I didn't realize I just volunteered to do that. He thought you were setting him up, too.
He thought you were setting it up. He also was just like, okay, well, no one else is going to do it. You see it. I can see that you see it. Make it. That's genius. And then what would you do if you weren't afraid? I love that one, too. I think I've seen that poster, or it's like a Pinterest board. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Yeah. And then you had 5 points I thought were really great, and I'm going to go through them quickly because that there were some really great things. Use art and science, right? Play more, put people first, experiment a little, and collaborate. What's your favorite of those 5? What do you think is the most important sort of key to being successful as a young creative?
Ooh.
I like experiment a little. Which one do you like?
Tell me why you like experiment a little, and I'll tell you which one I like and why.
Because I believe that the best ideas come when you approach your projects or your solutions as an experiment, work in progress. Mm-hmm, like, I'm just going to try this instead of saying this is what we're going to do and it's got to be this way. Because I think that you then become, you put yourself on a rail.
Yeah.
I think you overanalyze, you overthink it. But if you approach it as an experiment, and I don't think that's even what this meant. I think what experiment a little means is do things you wouldn't do. But I think experiment means approach all your projects as if have very low expectation for success.
Yeah.
And work really hard at it. And if it's great, it's great. If it's not,
wrong,
it's no loss.
Yeah. And there's less pressure. That's a really good point. I love that. I think that's kind of how we approach it as well, actually, is that, like, with the Triscuit example I showed, like, where there is a little bit of, let's just do a very small test and learn from that. So it's not like a national campaign kind of pressure. But my favorite one, this is tough because they're all my favorites, but probably putting people first, because we tend to forget. Like, brands and brand managers, they tend to forget that they're talking about real people when they're saying we're targeting 24 to 38 years old, you know? And so when you get a brief and you see that information, you forget that you're talking about real people. Or you get a brief and you think about, well, this is what I would like, or this is what my friends would like, and not think that actually we're targeting 38 years old in middle America, and what is their life like and what is important to them. So I think that if you start thinking about that first, you can actually be way more creative and way more successful.
And more easily. I think the work writes itself much quicker when you're honest about who you're talking to. And I actually talk about that in my classes where I don't give a shit about demographics. I don't care how old they are or at all. It's irrelevant. I want to know about a day in that person's life. I want to know the person you're talking to. And it has nothing to do with your product because they don't care about your product.
Exactly.
They've got 1,000 other things going on.
Exactly. And
how can your brand fit in their lives is much more important than how awesome your brand is to everyone.
Exactly. So. And I think that's the problem, is that we approach things, you approach things assuming that, well, people already know, like, we're drinking Deer Park water. People already know about Deer Park water, so I don't even have to, like, go out and say this is Deer Park or this is water, this is why you need water. Whereas realistically, nope. There's a lot of people who don't drink water. There's a lot of people who won't want to drink bottled water. There's a lot of people that don't know who Deer Park is and think it's just the same thing as Poland Springs. Like, so there's a lot more work that you have to do. And once you start thinking about that and get out of your own head, then you can actually solve real problems.
Yeah. So what do you think it is about Neisha Tweed Bell? What is it about yourself? What personal trait of yours do you think has served you best so far?
Ooh. I actually just had my review and we had to talk about this. This is so good. It took me weeks too to get to this answer. I kept asking, like, strangers on the street, what's my strength? Anybody please tell me. It's empathy. I'm really empathetic to the people. I think that goes back to me just thinking about the people that we're trying to talk to, but also to my clients and what are their issues and what are their concerns, to the agencies we're working with and what are their issues and their concerns. And so I'm able to, like, look at all of the different kind of needs and issues and all that are happening and figure out how to get everybody to work together and to come to a good solution. That's
great. I didn't even mention these other great things that are on here, like that you've done your blog,
Baby Food for Creatives,
which is a great resource that and I don't have the page of, you're on. Here it is. Advisory board member for AdColor. You've worked at the 4A's Multicultural Advertising Internship Program, creator, facilitator, and organizer. She Works Hard for the Money panel series. So there's a goodness streak in you, and I think that's an awesome thing. Last question I've asked, and I love that I have you've never heard this before because you don't listen to the podcast.
No offense to the podcast. It's all about me and my listening skills.
It's not. I don't take it. I'm not.
Okay, good.
So knowing what you know now, if you could go back to the day you graduated from school, what would you whisper in young Neisha's ear?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. What would I whisper in my ear? Well, you know, I talked about this just now at forum. Is that, like, right after I graduated, I didn't want to do advertising anymore. Yeah. So I may have told myself to not do it. But no, I love my career. I love the path that I've had. I would have probably told myself to take more risks, which I feel like I did take a lot of risks. Like, I moved to New York without a full-time job, without a place to stay. And
just tell yourself it was worth it, probably.
Yeah. I wish that I did more of those things. I wish that because every risk that I've ever taken worked out so well.
Oh, cool.
That I wish that I just was jumping out of planes and.
You can still jump out of a plane.
No thanks. I'm too old now. Like, to, you know what I mean? You get to a certain age where, like, you're just like, well, that's just crazy. I'm suddenly scared of heights, and
something else will get me at this point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
That's cool. Listeners, if you want to get a hold of Neisha, you can reach her at neishatweedcw@gmail.com. That's Google Mail. I believe it's a free service by Google.
On the internet?
It's on the internet. You can reach me, as always, at danspodcast@mac.com. Make sure you like the Facebook page. I say this at the end of every show. I probably should have said it at the beginning. Facebook.com/DGMS podcast. That's on Facebook, which is also a media platform for you and your advertising friends to enjoy and take advantage of. I'll be back again in 2 weeks. Until then, thank you for listening. Neisha, thank you again so much.
Thank you for having me. So good to see you.
You too. Listeners, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye. Cool. That was fun.